If you're an actor in this world, you are an entrepreneur unto yourself. Because let's just be honest, if we're lucky, we spend 10% of our time in front of cameras. The other 90% of our careers is administrative and amplification.
Meet David Bianchi, a multi-hyphenate actor, filmmaker, and spoken word poet, boasting over 100 professional credits in studio films and major network TV. Recognized as one of the 100 most influential creators globally by NFT Now in both 2022 and 2023, David is also a prolific producer with 6 feature films under his belt and founder of Exertion Films, which has seen projects licensed to major platforms like Hulu, HBO Max, and Paramount+. His latest venture, Exertion 3 Films, is in partnership with gaming giant Gala, and he's currently campaigning for his project Razor as For Your Consideration for the 2024 Emmy Awards.
What would you like your legacy to be?
I want to be able to be a good ancestor. When people look back at David Bianchi and my body of work, they can look back and celebrate what my contribution was to the minority struggle and to the creative experience through poetry, cinema, paintings, photography. You could have 100% of nothing, or you could have 20% of something. Grow the fuck up.
Welcome, David Bianchi, to the WeAudition podcast. How are you doing today?
Welcome, David.
Hey, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me. I didn't realize I was going to come to Buckingham Palace today.
There you go. We're not quite Buckingham Palace, but we are in beautiful LA with the view behind you there. David, let's jump right into it. Tell me about an audition that changed your life.
Wow. I'll tell you about an audition that changed my life that I was not even a part of. I was, this is funny. I was producing a project called I Want 'Em Dead. And last minute I had an actor bail out and I had 25 extras that were available on set and I needed someone to read immediately. And so I was like, hey, anybody in here want to audition for this role? Size, body type. Okay, cool. So they all lined up. So it's me, the creator, and Cisco Reyes was one of the leads in the show. And I'll never forget this audition. And it completely painted for me why casting directors are fucking terrified of actors. So I'm like, all you have to do is basically take your coffee bag, say, I don't want it. And then you throw it at him and you say, you bitch. That's all it is. It's like 2 lines. So we'll say, okay, whenever you're ready. And this guy, he turns around, does like, I swear on my life, does like a Michael Jackson spin and goes, are you ready? I said, yeah, we're ready. You know, let me know whenever you're ready to go. He says, okay, I just need a moment. He proceeds to walk into the corner of the room, faces the corner like he's got a dunce cap on, starts heaving and breathing, and then does like this speed walk along the perimeter of the room, all the way behind us, every single wall, and then starts doing push-ups. And me and Cisco are watching this guy like, is this fucking really happening? We're like, hey man, whenever you're ready. He's like, huh, and he's huffing and puffing and he's huffing and puffing. And I'm like, okay. So I throw him the cue line and he stops and he turns, he goes, you bitch, and just screams this like vulgar, like menacing scream at me. And I was like, this is fucking weird. And then it completely made sense to me why casting directors don't want you to show up and drop off press kits. They don't want you to email them. They don't want phone calls from you because there's weirdos out there that are giving, respectable actors a really bad name. And to this day, this is probably 18 years ago. I'll never forget it. He looked at me and says, are you ready? Like I was going into the 4th dimension. Like I felt like I was on Stranger Things or something,
And so what did you take from that going forward in your own career? Did you look at that and go, I am never going to do that? Or did that change the way you did things in your life?
Well, it completely changed the way that, it changed the way that I perceived casting directors and how I approached entering the room, right? Because everybody's fighting a war that you know nothing about. Right. And so we don't know the amount of trauma that casting directors have experienced through the hands of rogue actors or the guy with the chicken suit that's standing outside of CAA because he wants the job. Right. This town is full of kooks. And so as a result of that, it really changed how I approach the room. Making sure that I'm walking in, I'm being respectful, I'm acknowledging camera lines, eye lines. I'm not having tons of small talk, trying to be the cool guy. No, I'm going in there to do a job. My job is to book the room. And part of booking the room is being a consummate professional from the second that you walk in. Because you know what? Just because you're in a good mood and you want to talk about the Packers game, that's got nothing to do with the job, right? And now you're being disrespectful to someone's time because you're making it about you as opposed to just being a worker amongst workers and making it about the work, right? And so it really, really made me step back and just say, hey, you really just have to respect the process because any little nugget that might be too big or too boisterous or too friendly could be perceived as you being a weirdo.
And how's that changed now that you're in a self-tape environment? Because we're largely only doing self-tapes now, right? So how do you bring that energy forward in that way?
Brother, I love self-tapes. Even like 2 years before the pandemic, I told my team, I'm like 10 times out of 10, I don't want to go in the room. I want to self-tape. And I've even turned down auditions because they wanted me to go in the room. Like, no, if I can't self-tape, I don't want to do it. Fuck off.
What do you like about self-tapes?
Well, because when it comes down to self-taping, I get to truly tell the story. Now, of course, I'm a little different because I'm a filmmaker. So I respect light, camera, picture, sound, And so when I create a self-tape, I can control the idiosyncrasy. I can control the nuance. I can control the mannerism to the upteenth degree. I can also make sure that if there's a moment where I need to whisper in a scene, that's going to be heard at -8 decibels. If I do that in a room, when somebody's pressing a button on an iPhone, I don't have a shotgun mic here or a lavalier here. It can't pick up the idiosyncrasy. I can't create camera language and camera moves that are going to augment what I'm doing. I can't light the audition that is reflective of cinema versus episodic television or multi-camera or single camera, multi-camera. So I'm lighting and I'm creating self-tapes that are indicative of the world, of the story that I'm trying to tell. Right? Because my job is to translate text into a moving, palpable, emotional experience for an audience member. And when we're dealing with cinema, I want to use all the languages of cinema to my advantage to be able to paint that picture. One, because I want to be able to actually elevate my work to the highest possible degree. Number two, as a producer, and I can speak from my own advantage, is that when I receive a tape like that, there's not a piece of me that believes that actor will ever be late. He'll always be prepared. He is going to respect the process. And if he's that good in a self-tape, he's already camera ready. He's just going to elevate when he gets to set, when he has costume, props, lights, sets, and production design. So it says a lot about the actor in terms of how you perceive your brand as a professional. Now, I'm not saying that everybody should go out and buy a black magic camera and study light. That's up to you because it could be hobbyism. But there is something to be said about the minutia of playing for a lens that can't be captured when the camera is, 8 feet away. And
David, do you look back at those like a director and then critique them and then do it again? Do you have that whole process, or do you just do 4 or 5 and then just pick the best one? Is it part of that creative process that you do for every audition?
That's a great question. No, for every audition, I'm really sort of into my flow at this point. I'll do, 3 or 4 takes and I know which ones are good. Because it gets to the point where, you're just splitting a needle at eventually, right? But then I'll even give this alpha out. When I bring it in, I'm bringing it into Premiere. I'm color correcting. I'm mastering my audio. I'm denoising. If there's a moment where the gun needs to cock, I'm going to put a fucking sound design in there. If there's a gunshot off frame and I need to do this, I want you to hear the gunshot so you can acknowledge why I'm ducking out, right?
It's so interesting. I started doing a few subtle sound effects and it changes the scene that you're watching, which improves the acting for you as well, I think, sometimes when you use those elements.
100%. If I'm doing a speech about having lost my son tragically and it's a sit and talk, and it's a 3-minute speech, I'm going to do a very gentle 100 to 125% push. Yeah. You won't notice it, but you'll feel it.
Yeah.
It's little nuances like this that I think just make you a more Excelsior actor and also make you a better actor on set because you start to appreciate what every department is going through if you've never produced before.
Well, there would be an argument that an actor would say, well, that's not my job to produce, but counter to that, I think it is your job to understand the environment that you're working in. And part of that is understanding your frame. And so when you do that on a self-tape, like you say, a little Ken Burns push, which could be done very simply on an editing software that you can get anywhere, that just shows that you understand where that camera is in your emotions.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to know what cameras is favoring you. You want to know how to not stack yourself, even with your hand. I'm stacking myself right now for this camera, right? And as far as your comment about how actors will say it's not my job, I tell those actors to fucking grow up. Grow the fuck up. Times are changing. Okay, let's look at the boom of the .com era. You could say in 2002, well, it's not my job to be a web developer. Okay, you could live in that world, or you could build yourself a website in 2002 and become a more popular actor and get a better career going. Well, it's not my job to be a copywriter. I shouldn't have to write decks and proposals. Well, fucking grow up, right? Learn how to be an entrepreneur. Because if you're an actor in this world, you are an entrepreneur onto yourself. And you have to understand how to read contracts. You have to understand how to build a deck. You should understand some sort of editorial software. You should understand some sort of social media deployment software. There are so many different things that are outside of the classical purview of the actor, because let's just be honest, if we're lucky, we spend 10% of our time in front of cameras.
Yeah.
The other 90% of our careers is administrative and amplification.
If we're lucky.
If we're lucky.
Yeah, most actors.
If you're lucky.
So playing devil's advocate though, what do you say to the actor that says, well, no, it should be about the craft and it should just be about my emotions?
Well, then you could have 100% of nothing, or you could have 20% of something. Grow the fuck up. Like, I even tell young actors too, like, so if you have the basic mechanics of performance, let's say, for example, you went to theater school, right? And you understand, you have the groundings of being an actor, your Second City, your groundlings, you're doing improv, whatever it is. At some point, I tell the co-starring and the up and coming guest starring actors to honestly just forego scene study. Why would I pay Ivana Chubbuck or whoever $1,000 a month so I could do scene study and watch other actors do scene study? Because at the end of the day, if you don't book the job, you're not doing scene study anyways. So my perspective is go do cold reading study. Like, learn how to do cold reading, learn the craft of a self-tape. That's where you should put your energy. Because if you have the basics of being an actor, learn how to do this kind of shit so you can have killer self-tapes that are going to crush the room. Because our job as actors is to book the room, not to book the job.
Right. And that's one of the reasons we actually built WeAudition is it's a platform where people can cold read with each other every day.
And there it is.
And they're seeing other people's scripts. They're seeing the way other actors do the work. And I'm often speaking with people, and so is Rich, about acting class, and they're trying to figure out which acting class to go in. They could be reading with other actors that are working on television 24/7 every day, which is like an acting class unto itself,
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, I'm not disregarding craft. I think that any actor should have a good understanding of motion, voice and diction, of physical performance. And, you should understand scene study, but at some point you've got to book the job. If you are such a purist that you live in the world of, I'm an actor, I only work on my craft, that's all that I'll do. Well, there's a lot of Studio City 1-bedroom apartments that have paths literally drawn in them from actors rehearsing their own lines in a circle, and they're baristas. And then there's
I heard something relatively recently that's always been the case. Imagine back in the day when we're doing Shakespeare and those guys are touring around, before TV, before film. Those guys were going out with flyers. They were going out promoting their shows. They were going from town to town. They were really, getting an audience. They were going around and getting their audience for the night show. So their job was traveling. It was doing all of that promo. And then also they were sweeping the stage and they were making sure that the costumes fit and packing up the vans or the carts. That's always been the case. It's just different now. That's what I think.
Well, until they flip to a point where they become credible and they become successful to the point where you have a team of people doing that for you. And that's something I wanted to segue for you, David, because one of the things I've seen you do very well over the years, as you've expanded, as you become more successful, is add to your team and elevate yourself through delegation. Can you talk to us about the type of people you've added to your team and how that works and what you think actors should be doing? Do you have publicists? Do you have agents? Do you have managers? Do you have assistants?
Sure. Yeah. And I think that, I acknowledge, Rich, I think that's a great point, because everything is relative. And even if you're, Charlize Theron, if you're at the top of the echelon, even the A-listers are hustling, right? They're hustling Cannes. They're hustling the FYC. Right. They're hustling the For Your Consideration event, and they're lobbying and they're meeting voters because they want the Emmy. Like, everybody is hustling in some way, shape, or form, irregardless of what your paycheck looks like. Yeah. And to your question, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've got a management team, I've got commercial rep, I've got theatrical rep, I've got 3 publicists, but that's because I've got, they represent me as a publicist, and then they obviously represent my intellectual property. So those are different things. I have an executive assistant who is just absolutely wonderful. I have 3 editors and, a couple of marketing people. And then of course that's sort of purview of myself as an actor, much less as me as a producer. But when you get to the point that you're managing so many things like I am, you need that infrastructure, because otherwise things just don't get done. And, there are ways that you can remove the minutia out of your life so I can focus on being a better artist. The less time I spend on a spreadsheet, the more time I could spend thinking about, delegating higher ideas and, crafting season 2 of Razor, for example, or thinking or working on being creative, having a conversation with you, for example, and amplifying my voice and inspiring other people in the process. It's absolutely important. But the other thing too is that a lot of actors, they think that just because they have a publicist, they're going to get publicity. Well, it doesn't work that way, right? If you don't have anything to publicize, don't get a publicist.
When's the right time to get a publicist then? That's a question a lot of actors will ask.
Well, I think that publicity is only as good as the pitch, right? Because a publicist is going to pitch a concept to a potential editor. And if that pitch doesn't have temperature, the editor isn't going to care, but then the actor feels disheartened because they've paid for publicity, but there isn't really much to pitch. So you want to get publicity when you have something to pitch. When you have something new, exactly, something newsworthy, and that could be as simple as maybe you're playing the lead in a play on Santa Monica Theater Row. Great. Well, there are outlets that are looking for that story, right? Or maybe it's just a matter of, hey, I can't afford a publicist, so I'll just spend $500 and put out my own PR newswire just to increase my SEO ranking. So when people type in David Smith, he's the first person that comes up because he had the wherewithal to release his own publicity and increase his engine optimization.
Which you can do nowadays. There's various tools, like you said, and that's really echoes what we were talking about before with the whole self-marketing and admin. A lot of things people say, self-tapes is more effort for me. I have to do my own work. But then you've got all these other ways which you can use to make your actor life easier.
Yeah.
Right?
And keep in mind, if you're executing really high concept self-tapes, what else do you get? You get a gallery of stills that can now perpetuate on your social media. You're also proving to casting directors that you look like a movie star, that you look like a television star, that you don't look washed out because you got a ring light and I can see the ring light reflection in your retinas. Actors, don't ever fucking do that. Like, learn how to light. It's distracting. And it just gives you the opportunity to continue to inspire yourself. Because this is the most important thing, regardless of where you are in your career, is that we always need purpose, right? Because we can't do the big things without the little things. What's getting you out of bed on Monday and Tuesday while you're working for Friday and Saturday? So if you are working with a consortium of actors and you have a camera and you've got a little bit of grip, a little bit of electric, why aren't you guys getting together on Tuesday and shooting your own self-tapes and getting better at self-taping? Why aren't you creating a community in that? That gives you something to be inspired by while you're waiting for the audition. And while the food and beverage industry is beating you up, you have something to believe in. Or you're writing a short story, or you're writing a short film, or you're doing a spoken word performance. These are the things that have to give us purpose. Because if we give all of our purpose to things outside of us, we'll be exasperated when things don't go our way. And then we fall into depression. Our mental health starts to fail. We could easily fall into drugs and alcohol. You can fall into different vices. You could give up altogether. So you have to make sure that your purpose is coming from inside of you, so that when you show up for other people's events, you're already there. You're human. You're full. You're filled up to the brim, if that makes sense.
What you're saying is really inspiring. You're encouraging other people to do their own work, which is, we've been saying that too. It's difficult to start, but is there anyone that inspires you, that's started you on that journey, or inspired you to make your own stuff, or a mentor or someone that inspires you? If you'd like to join the WeAudition community, go to weaudition.com/show to get 25% off. Now back to the show.
I don't necessarily know a mentor, but like Robert Rodriguez is someone who I've always looked up to. I mean, he's got a book called Rebel Without a Crew that I think every filmmaker should read twice. He's like the epitome of the startup guy who is the DIY. He says, I'm paraphrasing, but he says, everybody's got 10 bad movies in their system before you start getting to your career. So hurry up and start fucking up, and that's just the truth of it. I encourage failure as much as humanly possible, because that is the most powerful teacher, where you're going to learn the nitty gritty and the nuts and bolts of how to get things done. Quentin Tarantino is obviously a startup. I mean, even guys like Sam Jackson. I mean, I like people that have a genesis story with zero nepotism in them, right? Nepo babies don't do much for me. There's a lot of them out there, and I know some of them that are not talented at all. And some of them are talented. But I'm interested in the grit. who came from doing extra work like me? Who came from working in the service industry? I've worked at more bars and nightclubs than I can count. Who came from, living with, roach infestations in multiple apartments? Like, who came from a theater degree and who came from maybe drug addiction that has just been to the darkest bowels of their own human condition and have had to surge through the phoenix to be able to get to a place. That's what I'm interested in.
And that's probably why you cast Danny Trejo in your latest series, Razor, right? Because he's a guy.
I saw him, yeah.
Having worked with him myself on a different movie, he is someone that did have that origin story and has come to acting through that and now supports emerging filmmakers in that way. Mm-hmm. Which brings me to, we talked about creating something out of nothing. And I heard you mention spoken word poetry or this. Talk to us about how spoken word poetry got you in an Emmys FYC campaign. Where's the let's have a look at this.
That's right on the other side of that page there. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So there's a journey from spoken word poetry to for your Emmy consideration for Razor. Tell us about that journey.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned earlier on, and this is such a dream come true. When I first moved to LA, I didn't have shit. My first job was I was selling hot dogs and hamburgers in Universal City Walk, and I thought I had made it. I was like, shit, I'm working in Universal City. Let's fucking go. I thought I was gonna be discovered. Never happened. So
not from that.
Not from that, anyways. Yeah. In some ways, I still feel it hasn't happened. But one thing that kept me alive while I was being punished by the service industry and getting stiffed on tips, and I literally lived in check advance America. Like, they knew me by first name because I would get paycheck advances against my paycheck because I was that broke, right? And the one thing that kept me alive was the open mic. So every single week, I knew I had multiple open mics where I could get up on stage, and I had a community of poets and performers and guitar players and acoustic bohemian types that I could inspire a room of 50. Or we're at the Poetry Lounge every Tuesday where I was a resident for 5 years and there's 250 people. I knew every week I could get up on stage and I could perform and I could flex. And it gave me a reason to write. And I was writing about socially conscious themes that fed my spirit, right? And so I wrote a piece called Soldier, which was basically my soliloquy to what a soldier could go through losing somebody in his arms during the Bush administration, Operation Iraqi Freedom. And that turned into my first ever spoken word film that I now call Spinema, spoken word cinema. And that ended up playing multiple film festivals all over the world. And that's where I realized that this was going to be my calling. So while I was struggling through 15 years of being a bartender and a waiter, I used arguably by now maybe up to $1 million of my own money in tips over the course of 2 decades to fund my own short films and my own feature films to get things going. And in turn, I was giving myself purpose, but also sharpening my knives as a producer. People always ask me, how do I get my foot in the door? I say, what fucking door are you talking about? Just build a door and walk through it. Your first one's going to fall apart because you have no fucking idea what you're doing. But eventually you'll bevel edges. You'll learn how to use the right adhesive. And then Darren will be like, yo, you just built that cool door. Hey, you want to build one together? Cool. Mm. And now we're building more doors together. Now someone might ask, hey, David, I got this door I want to build. Will you help build it with me? Now I'm building doors for people to walk through. Right. And so, to your question about spoken word, I've been producing Spinema spoken word films for the better of 18 years out of my own money. And they've played all over the world. And in March of 2021, come the pandemic, I'm always looking for ways to succeed. And so I found the NFT scene and I minted the first ever spoken word film as an NFT. And that ended up selling successfully. And I donated all the proceeds to the George Floyd Memorial Foundation. And so philanthropy and social service has always been a part of my artivism, if you will. That then led to becoming a pretty significant thought leader in independent film and blockchain technology. And so as a result of that, next thing you know, I'm working with the biggest people in Web3 tech and blockchain tech. And then that led us to where we are now, which is, in an Emmy campaign for Razor, which is a Web3 cinema, which is a Web3 episodic TV project.
Right. David, you touched on it there. Sorry, you touched on it there with NFT sales. Did you do the finance for Razor? Was that all through NFT sales, or was that a combination of lots of things? Or how did blockchain technology fit into that sort of finance package?
Sure, great question. But so one of the propositions that we're doing at Gala Film, and so Gala Film is the distributor, but also my production partner, is that we saw a lot of people during the bull run basically pre-selling NFTs to be able to crowdfund a project. And it worked. But for me, I find that a little counterintuitive because the gestation period to complete a feature film is so long. You want me to spend $500 now to buy a speculative asset for a speculative project that might be good, that may get distribution, even if it gets completed. Like it's really a stretch, right? So our projects were funded by Gala Film with the intention of being releases on their new Web3 distribution platform, which is now live, called Gala Film. And so we weren't selling NFTs to promise the show. We promise you the show, and the NFTs are digital collectibles off the back of a very exciting IP.
Which is sort of a funnel into Gala as a platform, isn't it? It's similar in the way that Amazon makes shows, but they want you in their ecosystem. It's the same sort of thing.
Yeah, in many ways, yeah. So what's badass about what we're doing at Gala Film is that Gala Film is a freemium platform. So there's no AVOD, TVOD, SVOD, there's no subscription. It's just an email address, set up an account, click, watch, and play. So we have basically created a gamification business model around this because people are like, okay, where the fuck is the money coming from? How are you surviving? So Gala is a blockchain gaming company. So if you think about a game like Fortnite is a wildly successful show or a wildly successful game, but the top 3% spend so much money that it's free for the bottom 97% because you're focused on deep, deep fandom and deep, deep lore fandom. So we completed all 8 episodes, and then me and my co-writer Dan Pico went out and wrote 40 more pages of expansive scene content. So I directed 40 more minutes of expansive content that isn't in the show. So you go on Gala Film, you could watch, and then boom, you get a mystery box. You open it up, and then you get shards. And these shards are pieces of scenes. And as you collect them, you get to unlock scenes that have never been seen before that expand the lore and the world of Razor, which are like vlogs, personal phone calls, intercepted phone calls, genetic strands, Sicario style Vice News documentary footage, things that expand the world. Now, what's even more interesting is the more you collect, the more you own, the more you earn. Because we built the first ever watch and earn ecosystem through the power of Web3 technology. Now, the interesting thing is that you don't even have to understand what crypto is to watch. You could be a gal in your 80s from Kalamazoo, and you can go and type in your email address, click play, and enjoy. Or if you're a deep tech mind who's 23 years old out of UCLA, you can watch and you can get into the collectability side of it. So
it's like an expansion on the old choose your own adventures, where you could see different examples of the same story, huh?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, in that, unlike what Bandersnatch did, which is what Netflix did really, really well, Choose Your Own Adventure, that was fundamentally Choose Your Own Adventure. What we're doing here is we're just creating digital collectibles and allowing you to expand your understanding of the world deeper and more immersively than ever before.
I see them a little bit more like sports cards, like I watch a football game and then I can have, all of my team members. I saw them a bit like that because I looked at the shards and I was like, okay, well, this is more content. Yeah, I can delve into that a little bit more. And then I got the mystery box pop up and I was really interested to know what that was. I didn't know what that was, but you've kind of let me know a little bit more about that. I want to collect all of them so I can have the whole team, or I can have the whole...
It's gamifying content, isn't it, really?
Is that right? Yeah, that's what it feels like.
Yeah,
I don't know if, David, that's the idea.
Yeah, it's very much like that. Like, let's, look, use a popular IP. Let's take Star Wars, for example. You buy a lightsaber because you fell in love with because you fell in love with the movie, not the other way around, right? But what if you can collect this digital lightsaber, right? And let's say you collected all 4 parts of this lightsaber, using this mic as an example. I complete the lightsaber. Now that connects to the network. Now off the back of owning the entire thing, I'm suddenly earning like 20 film coin a day. And then I go on Coin Market Cap, and then maybe coin is trading at 25 cents, maybe $1. I'm earning $25 a day off the back of having collected this lightsaber. So, I mean, there's a little bit of clout in the community, but there's also the earning component of that. And then I can convert that to fiat currency. I can convert it to Bitcoin, Ethereum, USDT. I mean, whatever, crypto that I want to convert it to. Can I
ask a tech question off the back of that? Sorry if it's a bit off topic, but is that built on the Ethereum blockchain? Did you all do that through, or did you, is it Solana or?
Gala has their own layer 1 chain, and it's a chain that was built for gamifying, and it can handle over 1.5 million transactions per second. And it actually was rated the 3rd most secure blockchain in the entire world, right behind Ethereum.
Nice. I noticed you had Ethereum as the payments in the thing. I'm like, oh, you haven't chosen Bitcoin.
I did that. I did that because it's like, it's like Nike Puma, right? Which one has, bigger brand recognition, ETH.
There's utility.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think you've done really, really well with Razor is create this world. It's a
world's great.
Yeah, it's a very distinct world, very distinct characters. It's a very interesting tone and genre. From you as a producer and an actor in that show, talk to me about the auditions for actors. What made a good audition? Was it an actor that understood that world? Tell me what stood out to you from the other side of the table and why you picked the people you picked.
Sure. I wrote characters that were very, very rich and had dialogue that was really grounded into who they were. What I'm looking for in a performance is just, do you have a sense of geography, time, and space? Are you making bold choices? They don't have to be the right choice, but they need to be a choice, right? I can see insecurity in a performance. When I saw Mimi Davila's audition, and I'll probably release it eventually, like, it was unequivocal.
What about it? Tell me more. It was
just, I mean, she even leaned into the lower left-hand corner of the frame, and she's just talking to Grimm, and she was just like kind of leaning on herself, and she was so in her personal confidence. And of course, she's stunning, striking eyes. She had the look. She kind of reminded me of Trinity a little bit.
Yeah, I thought she was very Trinity.
She definitely has that look, but she was grounded, she was subdued, and she understood the power feminism that it would take to be a woman in the grid zone. Like, imagine if you're a woman that lives at 7th and Spring in downtown, you got to be a certain kind of gal to walk around at 11 o'clock at night. You know what I mean?
And you feel like she embodied that in the auditions?
She just embodied it.
In the self-tape,
right?
In the self-tape, yeah. Because everything was done via self-tape.
Do you know instantly? Did you look at that and be like, that's my person?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hands down.
For everyone in the show?
For Sedereki Wenikolo, who also played Cosimo, hands down. Yeah. Nobody could touch him. That character, Cosimo, was very, very complicated. I modeled him after Drexler from True Romance. Drexel, True Romance, written by Quentin Tarantino, directed by Tony Scott. Very complicated character played by Gary Oldman. So he was kind of the inspiration. So yeah, I needed someone that really understood, what does one do when you take too much LSD? But in a really fucking subtle kind of way.
I like that. It's like, you got the job, D. You got the job.
It's like, I needed someone that understood drugs, that understood the depths of the darkness, but could also be, charismatic and lethal in the same breath. Yeah. But there were a lot of now, mind you, I also want to acknowledge all actors out there that there were a ton of great performances that I saw, but didn't fit into the world that I was building. God's a great actor, but unfortunately, he looks too polite. His face is too baby. He doesn't look like he can handle himself.
And that's what as actors, we often don't understand that, right? Yeah. We think that, it meant we were good or we were bad. I think generally speaking, most professional actors I know are good enough. They're right or they're not right.
Yeah.
More than they're good or they're bad.
Yeah. This is great stuff to think about with actors out there, is that, like, when it comes down to actors, let's take like the recurring guest star level or even the guest star level, right? You'll get 500 tapes. And out of those 500 tapes, the top 5% are just great. So out of those 500 tapes, 25 of them are great tapes. And out of those 25, 10 of them are exceptional. Any one of those actors could do the job. But it boils down to which of those 10 actors is the right interpretation of the text that fits into the world that is the architecture of what the producers are building. And sometimes it boils down to height. Sometimes it boils down to skin complexion. Sometimes it boils down to facial hair or a pot belly. All these things matter when we as show. Yeah, no, you don't. You look sexy. but as a showrunner, I'm looking at all the elements, and I need to look at the palette of the world that I'm building, and is it logical for the world that I'm building? And I'll even tell you a real story, bro. I'm even thinking about it from a distribution perspective. So the grid zone world that I wanted to build more dark-skinned Black folks into it, and this is real alpha. I had to say to myself, if I created the world that I truly wanted to create, which is a tech blockchain world, which predominantly appeals to folks like you, 18 to 45-year-old white men, right? Now, from a distribution perspective, if I filled that up with brown skin and dark skinned Black folks, I'm suddenly going to be pigeonholed as an urban project, because I am not making any illusions about the fact that the world at large is still commandeered by white men. And so I didn't want to pigeonhole a really, really smart, sophisticated drama into what they think it is. And so I have to also toe the line as a showrunner to create the world that I want to create, but also have a certain amount of melanin that makes my side happy, but also makes them feel like it's okay for them to watch. Because otherwise they won't get along with it. Subconsciously, they won't get along with it. And to me, I wanted to create a world through science fiction that will be adoptable by all races, communities, and creeds.
Well, that leads us to our wrap-up question, really, David.
That's terrifying to think about it, but it's just the nature of business.
What would you like your legacy to be?
I want to be able to be a good ancestor. That's what I focus on every day.
What does that mean?
How can I do the best that I am doing today, moving forward to build the best possible future through my creativity, so that when I leave this illusion, when people look back at David Bianchi and my body of work, they can look back and celebrate what my contribution was to the minority struggle, to the cinematic experience, and to the creative experience through poetry, through cinema, through paintings, through photography. I want to be able to leave something that can be discussed, hopefully in classrooms, that can be discussed at the museum level, because I am walking on the shoulders of very, very powerful ancestors that gave everything for me to be here. And so I have a specific responsibility to do the same thing for the generations that are coming after me. Because we can't take anything with us. The only thing that we take with us is who we have become. Now, what I leave here is a side effect of who I have become. And to me, that is the most important thing, because that's all that I can really do.
David, thank you so much. It's beautiful, and we really appreciate you sharing your wisdom today, man.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, David. It's really nice, and I'm sure you've inspired a lot of people. You've certainly said some nice stuff that's inspirational for me, and I appreciate that. We both do.
Thanks, man.
We appreciate you coming to the WeAudition podcast, and we look forward to sharing this episode. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to the WeAudition Show. Your hosts were Darren Darnborough and me, Richard Cambridge, from WeAudition, the leading professional actors community where you can connect, learn, elevate your career, and always get a self-tape reader on demand. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you're a WeAudition member, or even if you're not, we would love it if you could please subscribe to this podcast, as it really helps us. And if you have friends who might get value from this episode, please share the link with them. You can find us at weaudition.com, or for your iPhone or iPad by searching WeAudition on the App Store. See you next time.